the parable of the fig tree. And so this particular individual had hired this geneticist to look at his blood and to look at his DNA, because his family had taught them that the sons of Cain had 3-strand DNA, and that was the reason why they were more apt and had more psychic ability and were able to perform magic and to manifest, ritually through intent, things of that nature, and why it is that they are involved in ceremonial magic and grimoire, the study of the keys of Solomon, things of that nature. And so that was the whole basis for this individual being hired by this person. And even though he was Illuminati, he was suicided. And then the geneticist himself was suicided. And this information was to remain quelled. But luckily for us, his friend was also a geneticist, and he inherited the information and was able to follow up on the conclusions and the study, the research that his friend had put together. And being exposed to this shadowy world of, New World Order elites, he didn't fully understand. But after having studied and come to know through research and having put forth time to, come to discernment on some of these things, it finally made sense to him. And so he was able to then release the information to world, of which he did so on the Hagman and Hagman show when he and Steve Quell were guests. It was also released as a Steve Quell alert, and even though those guys really don't, are not proponents of the, I guess I could euphemistically say it that way, they're not proponents of the whole seed of the woman and seed of the serpent, this, Cain being a child of the devil. And I know this as a fact because of, well, I'm not going to go into that, but let's just say my book was not well received, and in that manner when I used to speak about this information. But to set the whole premise of what we're going to go into, and I know we're almost to break, I want to start with a quick reference from Joel chapter 2, which is going to be speaking about the evil that will be released with the sons of Belial. We also have the prophecies of the return of the Nephilim and the giants. And there is also in Joel chapter 2 prophecy of a release of these particular individuals and these powers, these principalities. And you really have to understand the symbolism, the metaphor behind what is being alluded to. And I'll, as we go into the other scriptures and passages, it should become clear. And so I'm going to read that before we go to break. It says from Joel chapter 2, and then I'll comment on this before we go to break. Blow ye the trumpet in Zion, and sound an alarm in my holy mountain. Let all the inhabitants of the land tremble, for the day of the Lord cometh, for it is nigh at hand. A day of darkness and of gloominess, a day of clouds and of thick darkness. As the morning spread upon the mountains, a great people and a strong. There hath not been ever the like, neither shall there be any more after, even to the years of many generations. A fire devoureth before them, and behind them a flame burneth. The land is as the Garden of Eden before them, and behind them a desolate wilderness. Yea, and nothing shall escape them. The appearance of them is as the appearance of horses, and as horsemen, so shall they run. This particular passage, as far as there being the appearance of horses, if you go to Revelation, I believe it's chapter 7, there's a description of the locusts. It says, like unto the horses prepared unto battle, and on their heads were as it were crowns like gold, in their faces as the faces of men. They had hair as the hair of women, and their teeth were as the teeth of lions. And they had breastplates as it were breastplates of iron. And the sound of their wings was as the sound of chariots, of many horses running to battle. They had tails like unto scorpions, and there were stings in their tails. And the power was to hurt men 5 months. All right, continuing with Joel chapter 2. Like the noise of chariots on the tops of mountains shall they leap, like the noise of a flame, of fire that devoureth the stubble. As a strong people set in battle array, before their face the people shall be much pained. All faces shall gather blackness. They shall run like mighty men. They shall climb the wall like men of war, and they shall march, every one on his ways, and they shall not break their ranks, neither shall one thrust another. They shall walk every one in his path, and when they fall upon the sword, they shall not be wounded. They shall run to and fro in the city. They shall run upon the wall. They shall climb up upon the houses. They shall enter in at the windows like a thief. The earth shall quake before them. The heavens shall tremble. The sun and the moon shall be dark, and the stars shall withdraw their shining. And the Lord shall utter his voice before his army, for his camp is very great. For he is strong that executeth his word. For the day of the Lord is great and very terrible, and who can abide it? All right, just a couple emphasis here. When it says a great people and a strong, there hath not been ever the like, neither shall there be any more after it, even to the years of many generations. Does this not remind you of Genesis chapter 6, where it speaks of the sons of God mating with the daughters of man, creating a race of giants, those that were known in mythology as the men of renown? We'll be right back. All right, welcome back, everybody. I was talking before we made it to the last break about how prophecy, and also not just biblical prophecy, but also other cultures and very old, millennia old prophecies from other people, like Ragnarok from the Celtic peoples, and that are part of the Norse lore, and also that of the Eddas, which are poetic discourse about the prior times, and which have as part of them, and it speaks about the end of days and calls this period Ragnarok. And in this particular, if you've never read or heard about the Eddas, first off, there are many mentions of giants, and also the fallen angels and these different anomalous, strange type beings, what we would call the powers and principalities, these rulers of darkness, wickedness in high places, these kind of beings, and that as we get closer and closer to what is the reign of the Antichrist, there will be more and more of these creatures, these strange beings, some interdimensional, some, wholly in the physical, but there will be more of an appearance and more humanity and the world will become more aware of these type of creatures and their impact and effect on humanity in adverse kind of ways. Like it reminds me of the story of just recently, I think this happened maybe a year or two ago. There was the villagers down in, I believe it was Peru. A number of villagers had cited the appearance of this vampire-like being, and that this particular being was attacking them at night after twilight, and that it would also attack their cattle or their sheep, and like a chupacabra would suck the blood from its victims. And the attacks were happening more and more frequent. And finally, the Peruvian government had received so many notices and declarations for help from certain villagers, like in this one outlying rural area, that they sent the military, the Peruvian army, out there in order to um, quell the excitement and also the frustration and worry of the villagers, and to bring and to restore a sense of calm to the area and to this one particular village where these attacks were being frequently reported and were occurring more and more often. And so a group of soldiers were sent out, and they were to monitor and to kind of keep their eyes open for a certain period of time, just to, so that the military and also the government could say that they tried and they sent some people out and they were actually doing something about the concern of the people. Well, I'm not exactly sure how it was that, but one of the military personnel was able to see this particular being that they were talking about, and was also able to shoot this particular anomalous creature. And they, once they had captured it and killed it, they were able to photograph it and also to send it in to be studied. And there is documentation of this being, which was a bat-like, vampire-like individual, and that his wingspan was 15 feet long, was a hybrid bat-like being. It had it was huge. It stood 6 to 7 feet tall. And there's other stories and other like even here in America, there's rumors of certain beings of such nature, but this particular creature was actually shot and killed, and body was captured and was able to then be sent in for examination. Now, I'm not sure as to the follow-ups on that story as to what came about, but from the photos, it's strange, to say the least. And I think that there is a lot more of this kind of thing that will happen, and that is happening, and that we are learning about, because science declares that there's nothing new to be discovered, but yet there are creatures being discovered all over the world. Even every year, new creatures being discovered, new types of beings, and And so who knows what will come to light over the next few years, especially now that video cameras and things of that nature are so widely and easily and accessible, and that are making it even into these rural communities and many of the third world nations worldwide, and that the cost of such technology has been minimalized so that, you know, it's widely available, more so than it ever has been prior. And so there's going to be more and more things come to light that have not yet been discovered, and that has only been rumored to exist. It's like that whole show, Monster Quest, and also Destination Truth, where they study, you know, the certain rumors, myths from different areas and places worldwide, and then they go there and they set up their cameras for one night, which makes no sense to me as far as Destination Truth. They'll travel, it might take them a day and a half to get there, whichever place or part of the world, and then they'll set up their cameras for one night and then, you know, fly back home to make heads or tails of their whatever it is that they were able to capture. And it, you know, this seems just total lunacy to me. If you're gonna go through all that trouble to get there, why not, you know, spend a week there? You know, at least 2 or 3 days. And it makes no sense. But anyways, so it's my opinion that, as the prophecy says, and as other things say, that there will be these strange beings and these strange creatures released, and that they will come to the forefront of the attention of the world, because of, you know, who they are, and that the world will not be able to deny their existence, and also that they will perpetuate evil and affect humanity in an adverse kind of way that will not be able to be denied. And this, you know, goes back to the mythology, the ancient history of the rumors of succubus and incubus, and these particular beings that would seduce men and women, the sirens and the mermaids, the mythology of old, things of that nature. And so the world is a much more mysterious place than we give it credit for, and that those things which go bump in the night, even like with the whole ancient alien phenomena, reptilian beings, the presence of the Nakash, the feathered serpent, dragons, things of that nature, all that is based upon reality as well. A reality that many and most would deny, but certainly there's not going to be thousands, even probably millions of accounts of these kind of beings and these kind of creatures, and in the ancient record going back thousands of years, you know. And so, as there's a passage that I'll get to called from the Cave of Treasures, that speaks about a whole group, many groups of giants being imprisoned within the interior of the earth, and that at the end of days they would also be released, and that is part of the Joel chapter 2, the passage in the scripture that I just read, and what Revelation speaks of as the release of the locust army. In fact, I guess I should probably go ahead and go into that, because it will also dovetail into the information on the Antichrist that I've been wanting to read. And to talk about. So we'll go ahead and I'll read that particular passage. This is from the Cave of Treasures, which is a book that's part of the Ethiopic, one of their holy books, and that not many people have heard about or read. All right, it says this. When Alexander was king and had subdued countries and cities and had arrived in the east, he saw in the confines of the east those men who are of the children of Japheth. They were more wicked and unclean than all the other dwellers in the world, filthy people of hideous appearance, who ate mice and the creeping things of the earth, snakes and scorpions. They never buried the bodies of their dead, but ate them. People ignorant of God and unacquainted with the power of reason, but who lived in this world without understanding, like ravening beasts. When Alexander saw their wickedness, he called God to his aid, and he gathered together and brought them and their wives and children, and made them go in and shut them up within the confines of the north. This is the gate of the world on the north, and there is no other entrance or exit from the confines of the world, from the east to the north. There's a mention of 22 kingdoms that were imprisoned within the northern gate, which in my mind I equate to being like the northern polar opening, of which, there's only one exit and one entrance, as it makes mention of here. And that there's other stories like the Smoky God, which is an old, I believe it's a Swedish, like going back to the 1800s, a story that was passed down of a fisherman, a father and his son, and how they had arrived and got caught up in the Arctic North, and that they found their way into warm waters, and that the waters led into the interior of the earth, and that while they were there, they found and lived amongst giants, and that these particular giants that they had lived with, that they were kind and cordial, and that they helped them to survive over the winters. They stayed there for a few years, and then they were allowed to go home. But in the story of the Smoky God, if you've never read it or heard about it, it's very interesting to say the least. But the fisherman and his son, the story was passed down, and then it was eventually written down. But they speak of technology that the giant tribes had, that was greater than even what we have now, and that they also speak about, much like the spies that were sent into the land where the sons of Anak lived in Canaan land, that talked about how the fruit was of massive size, and also that they were as grasshoppers to the inhabitants of that land, and that the inhabitants of the land were cannibals, and that they would eat them. Now, in this case, the giants didn't eat these particular individuals, but we know that even with the Native American lore and the traditions of the Native Americans, that they speak in large part in ancient America, they speak about their wars against, especially like the Paiute Indians. They talk about how they were at war with a group of red hair, green-eyed, or blue-eyed giants, and that these particular giants they would capture, and they would you know, kidnap their children or any one of the warriors that might be out hunting, and that one of their favored ways of torturing and also of killing the individuals that they kidnapped was to slowly roast them over a fire and also to cut pieces off of them while they were alive and to roast them in the fire and to eat them. Sometimes they wouldn't even, roast it, but that they would eat individuals, drink their blood, and that these kind of stories and this kind of information was passed down through their oral traditions. And so there was a great fear and a great animosity towards these particular beings. And that in the archaeological record and the geological record here in the Americas, especially in North America, when the pioneers were settling and cultivating the land and planting gardens and planting crops, that they would often come across huge mounds, huge rock or stone mounds, and that in excavating or utilizing this stone for the building of what became the infrastructures of towns and villages and forts, that often they would find giant skeletons in the interior of these crypt-like spaces, and that there were hundreds, thousands of giants and skeletons found within the interior of the United States of America, and that all of these stories are kept alive within the journals of what were the early, towns, newspapers, city newspapers, and that these kind of stories were occurring often with the expansion of the Americas westward. There was even a book which I do recommend people to read, The Ancient Giants That Ruled the Americas, where the individual that wrote the book, he went to all these different libraries and studied, typed into the record of all these old newspapers keywords to search out stories of giants. And in the book, he brings out hundreds of these documented cases going to every region, every state in ancient America. And that, again, the Native American oral traditions also back these particular stories. In fact, the Paiute Indians speak about a time where they had backed up, cornered what was the remnants of this giant tribe, and they had blocked them into a cave, and the giants went into the deeper recesses of this cave, but the Paiute Indians built a huge bonfire at the front of the entrance, and putting on, different vegetation which would create really thick smoke. The cave was filled with the smoke, and that these giants were killed within the interior of the cave. And for a long time, this story remained part of the mythological record of the Paiute Indians until a group of individuals that were looking for bat guano to harvest. We'll be right back, and I'll tell you the rest of the story. Welcome back, everybody. I'm your host, Zen Garcia. This is Momentary Zen coming to you live from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern every Wednesday evening here on Studio B at Revolution Radio. And just a quick reminder, we are the largest listener-supported, commercial-free, and corporate-free, unbiased platform for truth and radio network anywhere on the internet and anywhere in the world. And in order for us to maintain and to continue to be able to come to you 24/7 with the various hosts that we have on most every time slot, I believe that most of it is filled. There are some late night spots. Um, and if you know anybody that would be a really good host, that Revolution Radio is always looking for new talent, and that you can contact Nighthawk and let him know. Or if there's somebody that you feel this would be a good home for, and that has really important or relevant information, and that would serve well in joining us as family. Certainly let the producers. I know Hal is always in the chat room just in time. Jer Bear also often there, and that Nighthawk is monitoring chat quite often as well. And so, if you do appreciate what we are able to do and what Revolution has come to as far as in the 5 short years that it has been in existence, to grow as large as we have and to attract as many very well researched, well studied individuals for hosts, then please do support us monetarily, because I know that a lot of you do give us your time and your effort and your interaction, your dialogue, and that you make all of our shows interesting with your colorful commentary and with your feedback and the interaction that you share. And without you, we would absolutely be nowhere, and that we would likely be, talking to ourselves. And without that interaction and without that fellowship, that's what really makes us unique, in that we are sharing and learning from one another, and that we are able to help each other to come to terms and to discernment on what's really going on with the world. Another interesting way that I've recently just discovered myself, but an interesting way that you can support Revolution Radio and also gain access to all of the archives of all of the hosts that are on both Studio A and Studio B here on Revolution Radio, is to pay for access, monthly access to the archives, which is generously cheap at $4.95. That's less than $5 a month for you to be able to access and also to download all of these shows that have been archived going all the way back to the beginning of the year. And so even if you just wanted to, pay for the archival access and then to go back and listen to the shows that you may have missed from your favorite host, I mean, you cannot beat that as far as a deal. And then to be able to download them to your own computer or put them on your iPod or whatever, device it is, and listen to them or burn them to CD. Listen to them as you drive to work. I mean, it's better than, wasting a lot of your time listening to the commercials, just trying to catch a song here and there over the various radio stations. I mean, that's just a complete waste of time, in my opinion. And for many of you, you do spend a lot of time driving back and forth to work. And so why not put that time to good use and make it beneficial for yourself in learning something new, in listening to somebody that may help you to understand the world at large in a way that you may not have had chance prior. And so, it's very easy. Just go to freedomslips.com, click on the donate button. It accepts PayPal. Through PayPal, you can use a credit card. And there's also gifts that you can purchase. to support the network. You can give them out as Christmas gifts now that we're at the holiday season. And it would, also promote the station and turn your friends on to something that could greatly benefit their lives. And certainly, there's a number of different hosts here which would appeal to any individual, no matter how eclectic they may be. Because you name it, we cover it. Somebody does. And probably more than a few are speaking about that topic or that particular issue, no matter what it is you might be into. The politics, the prophecy, New World Order, anything, truth, even like insider information, things of that. I mean, you name it, it's covered. And so, anyways, we appreciate you. Just know that. We do appreciate all of you that do take the time and that put forth the effort to support our endeavors, and that we are also aspiring to go 24/7 satellite so that we'll be able to reach even more individuals and to give access, opportunity to people worldwide in a way that even through the internet we do not have outreach of. And so know that that is part of our endeavor, that is part of our hope and our dream, and we just want to spread the truth. We just want to help people to understand, to plant the necessary seeds, to bring people to understanding so that they can prepare themselves for those things that are coming. All right. Where was I? Oh yeah, I was talking about the giant tribes before we went to break. And I was talking about this what was only in the oral traditions of the Paiute Indians, and that was the story of how they smoked out this group of giants, red-haired giants, and how they had captured them in a cave, and that none of them left, and so they all had to die within, and that this story would have been forgotten if it had not been written down by this one of the relatives of these Paiute Indians. I forget her name, but she wrote a book about it. You can look it up on Amazon. Just type in Paiute Indian, Paiute. And in her book, she tells the story of this giants and her ancestors having went to war with these particular individuals. But it really came to light when a group of men who were looking for bat guano to harvest for fertilizer and to sell, they came to this cave. They were exploring this cave in Nevada called Lovelock Cave. And in going through and starting to gather the bat guano, they started to unearth bones of really large individuals. And so they got the university, one of the colleges there, involved, and the archaeological department came out and they excavated the cave. And if I'm correct, don't hold me to account on this, but if I'm correct, they found the scattered remnants of over 70 giants, in the male and female in excess of 7 foot tall, and even children. And also their fishing gear. They utilized duck decoys, nets, hunting gear, things of that nature. And all of this was found within this particular cave. And so you can look that story up for yourself. In fact, Let me see if I can find the link for you real quick. And then I'll share that with you in the chat room. There's also a documentary that was done on the giants by the History Channel. And it's an excellent documentary, but in that documentary, this story is told. Okay, here we go. The Legend of the Red-Haired Giants of Lovelock Cave. Alright, I'll post a link and all I did was type keyword search giants and Lovelock. And you can find many different stories about this. So, let me post this in the chat room and then we'll continue. Because I was reading a passage from a scripture from the Cave of Treasures, which is a Ethiopic holy book that talked about these giant tribes, 22 of these giant tribes being locked into the interior of the planet at the northern polar opening. And so I'm going to continue with that particular passage. You know what? Before I do that, I'm going to read just a little bit of this story, since we did bring it to light. The name of the article is Ancient Giant Handprint Found in Lovelock Cave in Nevada, 2013. There were giants on Earth a long, long time ago. Has an ancient giant handprint been found in a cave in Nevada? Something really weird has been found on the wall of a cave in Nevada. In the 1800s, the cave known as Horseshoe Cave, now called Lovelock Cave. Lovelock Cave is located around 20 miles south of Lovelock, Nevada. Two paranormal investigators named M.K. Davis and Don Monroe have claimed to stumble upon the handprint of an ancient giant in Lovelock Cave, and the pictures that have been released to the public are absolutely startling. If this handprint is real, it is estimated that it would have belonged to somebody 18 feet tall. And what makes all of this even more compelling is that there is a very old Native American tradition that says that a tribe of red-haired giants was burned inside that cave a very long time ago. In 1911, bat guano harvesters started working inside this same cave, and after digging out 4 feet of guano, they found many broken arrows that the Indians had fired into the cave, as well as other interesting artifacts, and they found red-haired giants. Even in the shrunken, mummified condition, the skeleton ranged in height from 8 feet to under 12 feet tall. Dental casts of a regular man's teeth and that of a red-haired giant shows that it is twice as large as that of a regular human jawbone. The Review Minor, June 19, 1931, reported the find of 2 giant skeletons in the Humboldt Lake bed. Both skeletons were wrapped in a gum-treated fabric. The first skeleton was 8 1/2 feet tall. The second was just under 10 feet tall. In 1877, prospectors outside of Eureka, Nevada, found a human leg broken off 4 inches above the kneecap, including the foot. This leg was found sticking out of solid red quartzite rock, dating from the time of the dinosaurs. After using their picks to extract their find from the rock, they took it to Eureka. Medical doctors examined the bones and stated that it indeed belonged to a human of very modern appearance. The interesting part was the size of the bones. They measured from heel to heel 39 inches. All right, and that was just one quick story. You can find many in conjunction with this particular cave, and historically how the red-haired giants lived there and how they were also cannibals. All right, so continuing with the passage from the Cave of Treasures, it says that now there were 22 kingdoms imprisoned within the northern gate, and the names of these, I'm only going to read a few of these, but traditionally we know Gog and Magog. There's a festival in the northern UK that celebrates Gog and Magog, and how in their historical stories, Gog and Magog were giants. And so these two particular tribes were placed in, imprisoned within the interior. There's many others: Nawal, Eshkenaz, Dinafar. I'm not going to read all of them because none of the rest seem relevant. There is one that speaks about the dogmen, which is interesting, and another group of tribes called the cannibals. And what's interesting about the dogmen is that the Bible also has a story of the lion men of Moab. And if for those that are familiar with the Apocrypha or the pseudepigraphal text, if you read Maccabees 4, there was a particular king that was slaughtering the Hebraic peoples, and that he would torture them to death. And this particular story in Maccabees 4 is about one of the men of God. He was a prophet, his wife, and then his 7 sons, and how they were all tortured to death. And the king just wanted them to eat meat sacrificed unto idols and to renounce their God. But none of them would do, and they tortured the prophet first, and then they tortured each one of the sons, beginning with the eldest, and how even the mother, during, their trial and testing, she implored them to remain true to their faith. I mean, it's heart-wrenching. I the first few times I read the story, it brought me to tears. I would literally just start bawling like a baby because of just how touching and how strong they were in their faith, even unto death. But anyways, one of the interesting aspects of the text is that the torture for the king is done by these lion men of Moab, by these hybrid beings. And so that's just another story that, in my mind, confirms the word, which mentions that there were these lion men, these hybrid individuals. All right, continuing. At the end of the world and at the final consummation, when men are eating and drinking. Now this particular passage totally sounds like the Matthew 24, the Mark 13, and Luke 21 passage, where it's speaking about, as in the days of Noah, so shall it be in the days of the second coming of the Son of Man. They will be marrying and giving in marriage and eating and celebrating. Same kind of thing here. So at the end of the world and at the final consummation, when men are eating and drinking and marrying wives, and women are given to husbands, when they are planting vineyards and building buildings, and there is neither wicked man nor adversary, on account of the assured tranquility and certain peace, suddenly the gates of the north shall be open, and the host of those nations that are imprisoned there shall go forth. The whole earth shall tremble before them. Doesn't that sound like the Joel chapter 2 passage that I read? About that the whole earth would tremble before these beings. The whole earth shall tremble before them, and men shall flee, and take refuge in the mountains, and in the caves, and in burial places, and in the clefts of the earth, and they shall die of hunger. And there will be none to bury them by reason of the multitude of afflictions which they will make men suffer. They will eat dead dogs and cats. They will give mothers the bodies of their children to cook, and they will eat them before them without shame. They will destroy the earth, and there will be none able to stand before them. After 1 week of that sore affliction, they will all be destroyed in the plain of Joppa. For thither will all those people be gathered together with their wives and their sons and their daughters. And that will be the battle of Armageddon. That is talking about there. Now, I'm going to skip down to... I'm going to continue reading this particular quote, but I'm going to skip to the part that is talking about the Antichrist, because that's where we're going to go for the next two segments, and then we'll be right back for final segment. All right, welcome back, everybody, for final segment. And I know it seems like with all the material I have lined up that I wanted to cover, 2 hours really is just not a lot of time. You would think that it is, but I could probably do a month on this particular topic alone and still not be able to cover all the information that I have that is connected to it. The reason I'm doing this 3-part series on the two bloodlines, the sons of light and the sons of Belial, or the seed of the woman, the seed of the serpent, the wheat and the tares, the goat and the sheep, and those that follow the right-hand path, the narrow way, and those that follow the left-hand path, the broad path of destruction, is to set the premise for Dr. Joy joining us on November 29th. And she will be speaking about the third book of her Beguiled series, which is focused on the garden parable. And that explains metaphorically what happened, where Eve ate from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and that everybody believes that that particular fruit was an apple or a pomegranate or a fig. Those are the three main things that people believe was the fruit from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and that this is what is taught in Sunday school and mainstream churches worldwide, and that everybody believes that this was somehow really a fruit from some tree. But then as you continue with the Genesis 3, the scriptures that are connected to this particular symbology, which is absolutely symbolic, because then the sentences that are levied upon Adam and Eve, and also Satan as the serpent, is that prophetically the Most High tells Eve that she would have to bring forth children in pain and sorrow, and that Adam would have to work the soil in order to bring forth sustenance to feed his children, and that there would be enmity placed between the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent, or thy sons and her sons, as according to the text. And I'm referencing the Targum text right now, because they add that one particular part, of which the King James Version of Genesis chapter 3 verse 15 excludes that, and I find it to be absolutely significant. And the part I'm referencing is between thy sons and her sons. Now it does say in the King James Version 3:15 that I will place enmity between the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent. and that it will bruise its heel and as it's crushing its head, which all of that was a prophecy for Christ dying on the cross. Because when he died on the cross, he was actually crushing the head of Goliath, who was, one of these hybrid serpent seeds, a giant, which we know as the Philistine giant, and that when David struck him with a sling stone and stunned him, that he ran up to him and grabbed his sword and cut his head off, and then he took his head into Jerusalem to prove to the Hebrew people there that he had in fact slain the Philistine champion, and that Israel had nothing to worry about as far as the Philistine people, and that they need not be worried. And then he was directed by the Most High to bury his head on Golgotha, the place of Calvary, which Golgotha means Goliath of Gath, and historically it received its name from David having buried the skull of Goliath there on the crucifixion mount, which when Christ was crucified on the cross, that prophecy, the second half of the prophecy of Genesis 3:15 was fulfilled, where he was the seed of the woman that was crushing the skull at the same time that the seed of the serpent was nipping at the heel of our Lord as Savior Messiah. And so all that, was prophetically fulfilled by him, and it would also be his second coming, which would fill the second part of the prophecy, which is that the seed of the serpent would be allowed continuance until his second coming, and that they would survive even the flood of Noah's day, and even, the decimation, the judgment of that flood, which wiped out all flesh. But we know they were granted continuance because it would actually be Christ in his second coming which would separate the wheat and the tares, and that according to the Matthew chapter 13, the parable of the sower, that both would be allowed to grow up together until he comes again, when he sends his angels as reapers out to gather up the tares for the burning, and to place the wheat within the barn. So, anyways, let me go ahead and continue because I know that we're going to run out of time. Oh, and what I wanted to say, just as far as covering that Genesis 3:15, how people could somehow think that an apple would lead to those three prophecies, and how they could correlate to those prophecies is beyond me, no matter what kind of fruit you think it is. The only thing that is plausible is that the fruit from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil is symbolically veiling a sexual connotation in which Eve was beguiled by the serpent, the Nakash, the feathered serpent, the tree, the guardian of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and that was the result of her giving birth to Cain, who was the firstborn hybrid son of the devil. Now, if you don't understand it that way, there's so much more of gospel that absolutely will just not make sense to you. And not only that, but the world condition, what we are dealing with as there being an enemy, our half cousins, as I spoke about in that very initial paragraph where I talked about the elites and how they believe that their mother is Eve, but that their father is the devil and not Adam, and that they believe that they are predisposed to rule over us, and that the sons of Adam do not even know that there's another bloodline, another seed line, another lineage that worships a whole different kind of God, and that is inclined to evil, that is murderous and vindictive and jealous and selfish in their endeavor, and that they hate us, And that's why they war against us at every turn of the way. And we're sitting here in ignorance and blind to that there is even a war going on. And so that's why the Father said, my people are killed for lack of knowledge, because the sons of Adam are even ignorant of the sons of Cain. And as long as we are ignorant in such way, we're never going to really know what's going on. And that's why Christ emphasized in Matthew chapter 13, please read the whole of the chapter, because every one of the parables is connected to this particular knowledge. And this, he said, I will utter things that have been kept secret since the foundations of the world. That the seed of the serpent, the sons of Cain, the sons of Belial, have at every turn of the way attempted to hide their existence and hide all those scriptures, decimating them and stripping them out and excluding them from the official canons and official books of wisdom. Anything to do with the fallen angels, the children of Cain, the seed of the serpent, like the book of Enoch, the watchers, all of that has been excluded and stripped out in order for them to be able to hide amongst us and to rule from the shadows. And so if you do not know about the seed of the serpent, you're just never going to be able to understand what's going on with the world and why it is we have a prevalence of evil, even to this day and age. And that this war will be ongoing until Christ comes again. Which verifies two things. First, that there is a seed line born that is a physical lineage of the seed of the serpent, of the devil, that he has his own children here. And confirming that the devil has his own children, it also confirms that Christ is very much real and that he is bringing with him judgment and a time where every knee shall bow and every tongue confess, and we are all going to be called to account for the things that we do and that we did while we're here on this planet, and how it is that we serve the kingdom, and whether we did anything to bring people to remembrance and help them to awaken to the realities of what we're dealing with. We are all going to be held to account. And so you have to ask yourself, are you fulfilling your sacred duty, your sacred vow to yourself? You fulfill your role and your mission while here upon this planet, because time is short. All right, continuing with this one particular passage, because I haven't even made it through this quote from the Cave of Treasures. And I've got like bunches, and I've only read 2. So, all right, continuing. The heaven will be prevented from letting fall rain, and the earth from producing germs and plants. And the earth shall remain like iron through drought, and the heavens like brass. Then will the son of perdition appear, of the seed and of the tribe of Dan, and he will show deluding phantasms and lead astray the world. For the simple will see the lepers cleansed, the blind with their eyes open, the paralytic walking, the devils cast out, the sun when he looks upon it becoming black, the moon when he commands it becoming changed, the trees putting forth fruit from their branches, and the earth making roots to grow. He will show deluding phantasms of this kind, but he will not be able to raise the dead. He will go into Jerusalem and will sit upon a throne in the temple, saying, I am the Christ, and he will be borne aloft by legions of devils, like a king and like a lawgiver, naming himself God and saying, I am the fulfillment of the types and the parables. He would put an end to prayers and offerings, as if at his appearance, prayers are to be abolished, and men will not need sacrifices, and offerings along with him. All right, I think really there's no sense in me even getting into any other passage. But I will say this just to conclude the show that for those that are familiar with the scriptures in Revelation 11, it speaks about the two witnesses. And according to my research and the study that I've done, and I write about this in my new book, Skyfall, Enoch and Elijah, because they have not died, they are the two witnesses of Revelation 11. I know a lot of people believe that it's going to be Moses and Elijah because of the transfiguration of Christ on the Temple Mount. But in my opinion, that is wrong. It's my opinion that Enoch and Elijah will be the two witnesses, and there are many passages which confirm this and that verify this accounting. I will read some of those in the next show, and because it ties to some of the stuff that I'm going to be sharing. But if I can find this one quote, I'll read it and we'll end show with that. And then I'll share final commentary. Oh yeah, here it is. Okay. This is from the Gospel of Nicodemus. After Christ had descended down into hell and taken the patriarchs from Adam to the thief on the cross that had died with him into paradise. And he gave them over to Michael so that they could be baptized in the Arturian lake, into which they were then allowed to go into the city of God, New Jerusalem. And it says this. Then the Lord, holding Adam by the hand, delivered him to Michael the archangel, and he led them into paradise, filled them with mercy and glory. And two very ancient men met them and were asked by the saints, Who are ye who have not yet been with us in hell, and have had your bodies placed in paradise? One of them answering said, I am Enoch, who was translated by the word of God. And this man who is with me is Elijah the Tishbite, who was translated in a fiery chariot. Here we have hitherto been, because they never went to Sheol, they were taken up into paradise and allowed to be there by the Most High. Here we have hitherto been and have not tasted death, but are now about to return at the coming of the Antichrist, being armed with divine signs and miracles to engage with him in battle, and to be slain by him at Jerusalem, and to be taken up alive again into the clouds after 3 days and a half. Now, in the next show, when I'm doing this other study on the Antichrist, I'll share a couple more confirming witnesses to this particular passage, and I will show that indeed it will be Enoch and Elijah that were translated, that never tasted death, that will come again during the reign of the Antichrist, and they will convict him. And as it says in Revelation 11 specifically, speaking about the two witnesses, they will convict the Antichrist, and then they will be murdered by him, and they will be allowed to and left in the streets of Jerusalem unburied for 3.5 days, which is parallels and is relevant to the reign of the Antichrist, which is 3.5 years, the latter part of the tribulation. And so, with the fulfillment of the last pope and Peter the Roman coming to light, and that Francis is the fulfillment of the last pope, Peter the Roman, that he will be the false prophet that introduces the reign of the Antichrist, and I expect that this is going to be any time, if not already in some way, having already happened. And so, when the Antichrist, and I know a lot of you believe it's Obama, it's my opinion that Obama, even he's one of the Antichrists, but he is not the Antichrist. And when I bring Dr. Joy on, she'll share her work, which, she has strong belief that Prince William is a cloned image of Christ and that he fits all the precepts for what will be the Antichrist. And so we'll talk to her about that as well. But it's my opinion that whomever and whatever human body he indwells, that he will have the power of the fallen angels to, share all kind of signs and wonders. And that all of the passages, which I'm going to be reading over the next show and talking about all of this, is connected to what I've been talking about. And so I appreciate all of you. And I thank you. And this also aligns with the Hopi prophecy, which, if I have time, I'll read about that as well. And I may do another show in December on this information because, as I said, I just have so much to share. And a lot of it is information that most of you have not heard about, not read about. It's from books that not a lot of people know about. And so, as I said earlier, this will all make up and be part of my newest book, which I plan on having published and release it in the spring. And again, it's on the war in heaven and the last days and the destroyer. And so, and if you're interested in any of my other books, I have written 7 now. The ones that I have available are my 3rd book, A Different Way of Being, my 4th, Lucifer, Father of Cain, which I do have the 2nd edition that I'm releasing. My 5th, Awaken to the New World Order, my 6th, Sons of God, Who We Are and Why We're Here, and my 7th, Skyfall. Contact me at zengarcia.com or at Facebook, Zen Garcia. I can bundle them for you. They make great Christmas presents. I'll be glad to autograph them and, personalize them if you want to, give them as Christmas presents to your loved ones or family or friends. If you buy multiples, I will certainly discount them even greater and further. And I'm also just now releasing and starting to sell the 2nd edition version of Lucifer, Father of Cain, which includes 50 more pages of information and Bible codes that are connected to the revelation of that book. God bless all. Good night. Love you, and I appreciate all of you.